president constructing an exit ramp of sorts there for the war. Let's bring back David Urban and David Axelrod. David Urban, the president there seeming to suggest that the war could be over before the end of April. And also that having the Strait of Hormuz released from Iranian control will not be a goal of the war. What's your reaction?
Yeah, Jake, it's you've heard him say this, and the members of the administration say that they're looking towards European allies have great minesweeping capability, and they're hopeful that they will participate in clearing and cleaning and opening the Straits of Hormuz. So I don't think that's any surprise. I do think it's a surprise hear the president come out and say 2 to 3 weeks. But Jake, when the meeting with Xi was put back on the calendar for I think it's May 15th. You kind of knew that there was going to be a wind down of this war. I couldn't see President Trump and President Xi meeting while there's still hostilities ongoing in the Middle East. So I think the DOD, I think they're working through their target list. I watched the press conference this morning. They're doing their primary, secondary, tertiary targeting. They're wiping out as much as they can. They're mowing the lawn is now the euphemism, right? They're doing as much lawn mowing as they can and setting this regime back as far as they can. And you heard him talk about, we've had regime change, right? We've gotten rid of those 30 or 40 people at the top. Well, there's still the same theocracy there, different leaders, but you could call it regime change. And so I think this is, it's a smart way for the president to get out of here. And I think the American people, is gas prices, you pointed out earlier, as they climb higher and higher and higher, I think people's opinions will wear thinner and thinner and thinner in America, unfortunately.
David Axelrod, your reaction? He obviously is leaving not only the Strait of Hormuz as an open question as to what's going to happen there. He expressed hope that there would be a deal that would open up the strait, but it's not a must. And also there's the question of whatever remaining nuclear material is in Iran. What's your reaction, David Axelrod?
Well, look, we were told at the beginning, the president and others said, we don't want to have to go back. We don't want to have to mow the lawn. Now, lawn mowing is in fashion, I guess. But I'll tell you the numbers that I think were affecting the president. Yes, the U.S. and Israel have done tremendous damage to Iran and set their program back, not just their nuclear program, but their missile program and their ability to mount aggressive tactics in the region. But what he hasn't done is regime change. What he hasn't done is recover that nuclear material. And I think, Jake, the numbers that he was looking at were an approval rating that has now slipped below 40, the worst of his administration, and gas prices that have slipped over $4. And it is having a really serious political impact on him. And he's hearing it a lot, I'm sure, from his Republican colleagues who are on the ballot in November. This was a predictable moment. There was no way that Donald Trump was going to hang in there in light of these polls and public opinion sliding against him and putting in jeopardy the House and the Senate, which are already in deep jeopardy come November. And I think the press conference also, if you hear all the other things he was talking about, was a political attempt to blast through all that by firing off his golden oldies and trying to create other controversies so as to say to people, this is done, we're back to business.
Now let's turn to the executive order President Trump just signed. It has to do with mail-in voting. The White House says this order will give state election officials a comprehensive view of who eligible voters are in their specific areas. It orders the Postal Service to verify ballots will only be sent and returned to and from eligible voters. Let me bring into the conversation David Becker, who's the CEO and founder of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. David Becker, you're an election security expert. What is your take on this executive order?
Well, I've just quickly reviewed it, Jake. It just came out, and it appears the president hasn't learned any lessons from his previous executive order, which he signed almost exactly a year ago, and which was blocked by 3 different federal courts. And it didn't try to go nearly as far as this one appears to try to go. It is very clear that the president is trying to dictate policy to the states. And it's also very clear that the United States Constitution prevents that. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, has the Elections Clause. That Elections Clause says the state legislatures have the ability to pass election policy. And also that Congress can do it if the state legislatures don't act, or if Congress wants to impose some regulations for federal elections. But the president alone has no power. His power is limited only to that which Congress has expressly authorized. And so looking through this executive order, it attempts to mandate that the DHS create a national citizenship registry, which Congress has not authorized by any means. Their data is incomplete. We know that. DHS already admits that. It dictates that states should only be able to send mail ballots to those individuals that the federal government has deemed eligible, not that the states have deemed eligible under their laws. That's clearly unconstitutional. And it even goes so far as to say that the federal government is going to design the envelopes for mail ballots, which is something that can't just be instantly done. This is something the states have worked very hard on according to their state laws. Look, the framers were very, very wise. Election policy is best made at the state by the state legislatures, and the president trying to bypass it here won't have any legal effect. This is going to be blocked almost as soon as that ink is dry.
David Urban, I know I don't have to tell you the name of somebody who recently voted by mail in the state of Florida. His name is Donald Trump.
Yeah, look, Jake, listen, I think it's, I think we need to tighten up the state, how we vote by mail. I think the state of Florida has figured it out, right? I vote by mail in Florida because I'm usually out campaigning someplace. But look at our own home state, Jake, of Pennsylvania. It's a mess. 67 counties. Each of those counties has their own election rules, their own, how you count ballots. Ask Dave McCormick in his first race. It was, down to the wire, and it took forever. And I think the American people deserve an election system which they believe is transparent, is quick, is free of error. Look, we can vote in a day in India, and the biggest democracy in the world, press a button, and we know who wins on election night. The three of us, Jake, you, myself, David Axelrod, and others, have sat on the set at CNN all night, some nights, waiting and wondering when the election's going to be over, who's going to win. Drags on for weeks and months in California. That we can do better as Americans, and we need to, because faith in the American electoral system is going down the drain quickly.
Yeah, except the way we do it is it's up to the states, and Vermont and Kentucky are always the first two to.
The states are screwed up.
Well, I mean, Vermont and Kentucky know how to do it. Texas does it. Ohio does it. Then we got craziness.
Florida
in Arizona.
does it, right?
Yeah,
Jake,
Florida. Yeah. So,
Jake,
yes.
Can I just say, yes, one of the reasons the people are losing faith is because the president keeps insisting that our elections are dishonest, that there is massive fraud, that people who are not American citizens are voting. And this has been examined and re-examined, and he's had his own commissions and so on. No one can find any evidence of that. Our election system has been the envy of the world. And the reason and so this is all about Donald Trump's assertion that he didn't win an election. He put a commission together about the election he won because he said he had beaten Hillary Clinton in the popular vote. Pence headed up that commission. A year later, they had to disband because they found no evidence of that. So we are being thrown into another chaotic kind of legal battle over something that we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
David, thank you so much. Appreciate it. The final preparation.